Today we're looking at 8 premium mobile filmmaking apps for your iPhone to help you figure out which one you should spend your hard-earned cash on. In this video, we're going to review all of the apps based on ease of use, functionality, and value for money. Now, Filmic Pro, king of them all, came first as far as I'm aware, at least many years ago. It sits at the top of the pile. But you'd have thought that given the amount of time that has passed, other app developers would be able to use that template and come out with the perfect app. Well, I don't know if there's such a thing as the perfect app, as you're going to see. It's worth pointing out that we're only looking at the video functions of the apps, so if the app has fantastic photo taking capabilities, then we're not really giving credit for that. This is a video-based analysis. Also, log profiles, picture profiles. We did a video on Filmic Pro's Cinekit, or we certainly covered it in a bit of detail. We don't see value in log profiles at the moment for smartphones. You can watch that video if you like, so we're not going to deduct points or give points for the availability of supposed log picture profiles. Do grab yourself a copy of our comparison chart for all of these apps. There's a link below to that. You can see how they stack up against each other, and let's get into it now. Filmic Pro came first, and it's still the benchmark against which all other apps are compared. All of the 8 apps mentioned today give you full manual control to lock off your exposure, your white balance, your focus settings. Filmic Pro, however, takes that to the nth degree with a ton of professional functionality that a more experienced user will really appreciate. We have custom file naming, we have an HDMI output, we have aspect ratio options, aspect ratio overlays, guides, we can select which microphone on the smartphone we want to use at any point in time. The list goes on and on. Filmic Pro is completely unique in that it lets you film at one frame rate, let's say 50 frames per second, but actually record that data at a different frame rate, so 25 frames per second, for example. This does away with the risk that you're going to bring random variable frame rates into your timeline. You might not realize, but some apps, if you film at 50 frames per second, the piece of footage could actually be captured at 47 frames per second. The phones are not designed to deliver a constant frame rate. So this is really important and a useful feature that I value tremendously in Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro also gives us the double reticle approach to setting your exposure and your focus, which I think is fantastic. It gives us independent control of our focus settings, so we could have autofocus, for example, but we lock off our exposure so we don't see those ugly exposure changes. Many of the other apps have adopted this approach as well. Some of them haven't, and the ones that haven't, I miss it. For all its strengths, Filmic Pro does have a few downsides, and I'm mindful that one of the main reasons to buy a third-party mobile filmmaking app is so you can lock off your exposure settings. You want those settings to be locked off. If you rotate your screen, you don't want to flip back into auto exposure. If you go into playback mode to check the file that you just captured, you don't want it to knock your settings off into something completely random afterwards. There's so many ways that Filmic Pro ruins your manual settings, and it's really quite annoying and it can lead to mistakes. So you just have to work through that when you're using it, but it is a bit of a pain. The live visual analytics like zebras, focus peaking, false color, all that kind of stuff are only available in the real-time frame rates. Now we shoot all the time in 50 frames per second, which means we don't have the benefit of those tools. We love the fact it has advanced focus pull controls, but they're really hard to use. Little tiny lines on this focus dial. You don't know which point is A and B, which is your start point, which is your end point. It's implemented much better in other apps. Finally, the Cinekit upgrade that costs about as much as the app itself just to get access to a log profile is, in our opinion, not worth buying. It's promoted as turning your smartphone into the ultimate cinema camera and all this kind of nonsense. Well, I'm afraid it is in fact nonsense. It doesn't bring any benefits whatsoever in terms of getting 2.5 stops of dynamic range. I don't like it, it doesn't sit very well with me, but nonetheless, if we put that aside, Filmic Pro, it's a good app. Ease of use, let's give it a 7. Functionality, a 9, has pretty much everything. Value for money, a 9 if you don't buy that Cinekit. At the end of the day, $14.99 is not a lot of money for tremendous functionality. Total score 25 out of 30. This is the benchmark against which all other apps are compared, so let's check them out now. MOVIEPRO comes in at $9.99, and I like this one. The live view tools are easily accessible, and unlike Filmic Pro, they're available in higher frame rates also. The settings are easily found on one page. Everything you need is there. There's no noise. You can create presets. It's just as you would want it to be. I absolutely love the focus pull option. You get little A/B markers, which make it a lot more intuitive to use, certainly when compared with Filmic Pro. Plus, it's one of the very few apps that, like Filmic Pro, even gives you focus pull speed control, so you can actually modify the speed at which the focus shifts between those A and B points. Like Filmic Pro, we also get the double reticle system, so you can control your focus and your exposure manually on the screen. In terms of any downsides, we did notice some variable frame rate issues with this app, so when recording at 50 frames per second, we didn't always get a true 50 frames per second. A tiny criticism is that you can't directly airdrop the clips from the app to your computer. You have to shift them to your camera roll first, which is one extra step. And it's also missing a few functions like the ability to custom name your files or some aspect ratio overlays, which can be useful in terms of setting your composition at the time of filming. But that's about it. So MOVIEPRO is a really strong app. For ease of use, we've given it a 9, love the system. Functionality, 7, it's missing a few things. And value for money, it's a 9. Total score, 25. Protec is a relatively new app, and on paper it is the Filmic Pro killer. It has a beautiful interface, it's really easy to use, and it has tons of functionality. In addition, it has some unique features. It has a portrait video mode, which is really exciting and quite frankly worth the price of this app alone. We have dual camera record, much like Filmic Pro's double take system that was introduced recently. Protec promises us constant frame rates. The variable frame rate issue is dealt with. If there is a problem, you'll be notified that the app is struggling and that frames are being dropped. I've never seen that notification, and the files have come in with the constant desired frame rate. We have all the other advanced functionality like presets, hardware support for gimbals, anamorphic lenses, a screen flip for your 35mm depth of field, adapters, and so on and so forth. So, having created this tremendous app, how did the folks at Protec forget to put 50 frames per second in the frame rate options? We shoot 50 frames per second all the time, it's not in this app. Added to that, why doesn't the screen flip, the interface, why doesn't that flip upside down when the phone goes upside down? I don't want to be reading my white balance numbers like this if I turn the phone upside down so I can get that lens really close to the ground. Given the power of this app, I'm sure these are just oversights that can be fixed. One thing I do miss is the lack of a focus reticle, unless I've missed something. The way I like to focus with a smartphone is I'll use the phone's excellent autofocus, so I drag that focus reticle to where I want the focus to be, and then I flick it into manual focus so that the focus doesn't change. I want constant focus for most of the shots. Without that, you're left doing a manual focus with focus peaking. Now that's very useful and it can be done very effectively, but it's slower. And so I like to have that focus reticle, and it's not there with Protec, so I miss that. As I say, Protec should be the app to dethrone Filmic Pro, but I'm not sure it's there just yet. It depends a little bit on your priorities though, because that portrait video mode is amazing, and I'm getting super excited with where smartphone filmmaking in general is going. I honestly think in the fullness of time, these phones are just going to replace cameras. It might take a while yet, and we've got to work around these small sensors. Maybe they get bigger. Who knows? I wouldn't want to be a camera manufacturer right now. But anyway, in terms of price, it's $19.99, which for you might be worth it just for that portrait video mode. The problem is you have to pay that every single year. It's a subscription model, and the app isn't perfect, and you're up against a lot cheaper and very effective competition and the incumbent Filmic Pro. So anyway, ease of use, 9 out of 10. Great app, easy to use, love it. Functionality, 7. There are some things missing from it. For example, 50 frames per second. Value for money, tricky one. If you don't value that portrait mode, then the value for money is a 5. $19.99 per year is by far the most expensive. If you value the portrait video mode, then it's worth every penny. But since we're kind of comparing it on a kind of pro filmmaking basis, I don't know, let's give that a 5 out of 10. Seems harsh, but I wonder if it is fair. Let me do the maths in my head. 9 plus 7, 16 plus 5, 21 out of 30 for Protec. Not sure if you call this one Mavis or Mavis. On paper, quite an impressive app actually, and some really cool functions that you don't get with some of the other apps, including an expanded focus option, so you can get in really close with your focus peaking, and your manual focus controls really pinpoint that focus. We also have a customizable function button, which could be useful, I suppose. You get customizable function buttons on cameras. We use them all the time here on this GH5. So I think you should get some seriously good value out of that. You get a huge vector scope on your interface, along with an enormous waveform that goes along the bottom of the screen. I think it's a little bit of overkill, but it's certainly useful. I'd rather have them than not. And you can flip into a full screen option to get rid of some of that, so you can see a bit more of the live view if you wish. I also enjoy the fact that you get the full selection of frame rates from 1 through to 60 instead of the preset kind of 24, 25, 30, 48, so on and so forth. It does have some value having those random frame rates from time to time. In terms of the downsides, the user interface isn't really that nice, which means the user experience is a bit confusing. It's not very clear where different settings are. Now, for example, I didn't think in Mavis there was a focus reticle. And as you know, I like a focus reticle. I like to be able to drag the focus reticle, use the autofocus to grab focus, and then set it to manual to fix that focus. Now, there is a focus reticle if you set the focus to target, but that option is nowhere near where the other focus settings are, like focus peaking and so on and so forth, in the menu. I just find it a little bit confusing. Maybe it's harsh criticism, I'm not sure. The other thing is that you have to look at these apps relative to their price. Now, Mavis is $16.99, which is, it's not one of the cheaper apps, let's just put it that way, and it is missing quite a bit of functionality. I've got a little list here. Unless I've missed something, there's no presets. Now, you need presets to be able to set your favorite settings, so you don't have to set them every single time. You know, presets are useful. There's no aspect ratio options, there's no focus pull options, there's certainly no portrait mode like you get in ProTake, or dual camera mode like you get in ProTake. I don't think there's any remote operation either. So these downsides would not be fair criticism if the app was $6.99, like the Moment app, which we're going to get onto in a second, but it's not, it's $16.99. That's not a lot of money, but price is a relative concept when you're looking at the value of different options. So ease of use for Mavis, it's fine, but that interface isn't very nice. So a 7 for ease of use. Functionality is a 7. Value for money, I've given it a 5. Maybe seems a little bit harsh. 21 out of 30. Okay, the Moment app, brought to you by those trendy folks that bring screw-on lenses and stuff like that for your smartphone. Big fan of the company. As for the app, yeah, it's pretty good. Now, first things first, it costs $6.99, and it comes with a photo app as well. So that has value, obviously, although today we're just looking at the video functionality. I do like the double reticle approach, although in the case of a Moment, I couldn't find a way of dragging the focus reticle and then switching it to manual focus to lock in the focus. So for me, that was a little bit confusing. I've got a few cons written down here. Give me a second while I read these. I think the main one is that this is clearly a photo app first, video app second. So for example, the app is designed to work in portrait mode, so with your phone upright like this. So when you've got it on the side, you've got some writing in video mode that's vertical, so you're kind of looking at this trying to see what your settings are. I think that's a bit weird. Also, if you go into the menus behind the live view, they're set up in portrait mode as well. So again, you're like this. You could be on location with your phone locked off on a tripod like it is now, reading the menus like this, trying to switch your depth of field adapter on. I don't think that's very user-friendly. Mindful that it's cheaper, it is lacking some functionality. There's no composition guides, no aspect ratio options, or overlays for that matter, no focus pull options. So the way I see it is that the Moment app is basically a cheap and effective way of getting manual control for setting your exposure, white balance, so on and so forth. And it does that well. In addition, you get a nice photo app all for $6.99. So if we put this through the scoring system, ease of use, I'd say ease of use a 7, to be honest with you, especially with this whole kind of looking like this when you've got your phone in landscape orientation. Functionality a 6. It's not a criticism, it's just a function of the fact it's a cheaper app, which means value for money. If you're only looking at the video specs, I'd say value for money is a 7. If you're including the photo app, value for money is a 9. It's great value for money. But anyway, we're only talking about video today, so 7 plus 7 plus 6, 14 plus 6, 20. 20 out of 30. Much like the folks at Moment who created their app, the guys at Beastcam who make all these rigs for smartphones and depth of field adapters and all kinds of stuff, they created an app as well, costs $14.99, and it's a good one. I like it. I love the interface. It's the way you want these apps to be. I just want to see my shutter speed, my ISO, my white balance settings. I want to be able to look instantly and see if they're locked off or they're in auto mode. It's perfect. In terms of menus, I don't want to have to go through millions of menus to get to various settings. Behind the scenes, I like a nice, simple, laid out menu. Beastcam has it. So far, so good. Unlike my major gripe with Filmic Pro, when you lock off your settings with Beastcam, they are locked in. Nothing is going to change that. You can even come out of the app and go back in and your shutter will still be at 1/50th of a second, your ISO is down on 32 and your white balance is locked off. This is great. We have presets much like the other apps or some of the other apps, but Beastcam takes it one step further where you can set a preset to open by default when the app opens, so you automatically go into your, let's say, 50 frames per second slow motion preset, because that's what you do most often with your travel videos. Really nice thought given to some of these functions. Another feature I don't think I've seen elsewhere is a horizon leveling guide, which is very, very cool. Beastcam's app probably has the most advanced file management that we've seen, whereby you can organize your clips into different projects on your digital slate. Very nice indeed. I don't think there's really any downsides with this app, just a few omissions of functionality. Your visual analytics, same as Filmic Pro, are only available in real-time frame rates, so you can't get your zebras and your focus peaking and so on and so forth in 50 frames per second, for example. And apart from that, I think it's probably fair to say that there's maybe nothing particularly unique about Beastcam. It doesn't have a portrait mode like PROTAKE, which could be a reason for you to get PROTAKE, even though it has some emissions elsewhere. ProCam 8 is an interesting one because it's one of the premier photography apps for smartphones, and it's extremely distinguished and well rated and reviewed in that respect. From what I can tell, the video functionality came next, and I just couldn't get my head around it. I didn't like the experience at all, if I'm honest with you. Added to that, I'm not aware that it has anything special that would make you want to get it from a video perspective if we ignore the photography functionality. Let's keep that in mind. It only costs $7.99. In terms of the pros here, I don't really have any. Cons, where are the focus controls? There doesn't seem to be any focus controls. Focus peaking controls in video mode. There seems to be a big list of photo functionality that doesn't make its way across into the video settings. I couldn't find focus peaking, no focus controls, no visual analytics from what I could see in video mode. I didn't like the interface at all. I'm touching the screen all over the place trying to get settings to come up. I don't know what's going on. I mean, just by way of example, if you want to set a different resolution and frame rate, you scroll in on your little arrow, which doesn't indicate at all that that's going to bring up video settings, but it does. And then you got to scroll through this enormous list. It's the least intuitive interface out of all of them. So I just really wasn't a fan, to be honest with you. I'd love to give it a bit more considered analysis than that, but we need to move on. So anyway, ease of use, video only. We are only talking about video functionality. Ease of use, a 3. Functionality, a 5. Value for money, a 5, because to be honest with you, we're about to talk about an app which is $2.99 and has all of that functionality. So it has to be a 5 if we're talking video only. As I say, if video is an afterthought and you're buying it for a photo capability, completely different consideration. Anyway, video only comes to 13. Sorry. ProMovie, $2.99, probably the first third-party app you're going to find if you're looking for a free or just not free option. It is only $2.99, what's the worst that can happen? It's a great app. Now the thing is, because we have to look at functionality relative to price, we can't really complain too much. That, for example, it has no live visual analytics. You don't get focus peaking, you don't get zebras, you don't have focus controls, certainly no focus pulls. Anyway, there's no dual camera record, there's no portrait mode, there's no gimbal support, you don't get presets. There's a lot of things missing from this app. I also, I got in the notes here that there was an issue in terms of variable frame rates coming through. One clip that was captured at 50 frames per second actually showed up on the computer at 45 frames per second, so that's not very cool. But if you are, let's say, a YouTuber doing your whatever beauty vlog or something like that, you just need a good way of locking off manual settings so that your exposure doesn't change and your focus doesn't change mid-shot, and you want control, then this is a great option. Easy to use interface, just the way you want it to be. Same with the menus. It just gives you the information that you need and the options that you need. Also, the other thing that I really liked, and it does it better than Filmic Pro, is that once you've locked off your settings, in terms of exposure, for example, you get a little red line under your shutter speed, just confirming that it is locked. Problem solved. Very nice. I don't know why Filmic Pro can't implement something like that. And it's cheap. Perfect for beginners. So, big fan of ProMovie actually, and the reviews support it, as you will see in the App Store. Ease of use a 9, functionality is only a 5. I mean, it's missing a ton of stuff, but value for money a 9. So depending on where you are in this journey as a filmmaker and what you're buying your app for, this could well be the one for you. Total score, 23. What conclusions, if anything, can we glean from today's video? Well, different apps for different people, I suppose. If you're a hardcore filmmaker with a bit of experience, like us, then Filmic Pro is our go-to app. To answer your question, Filmic Pro is the one that we use. We are in the Filmic Pro world, if you like. I have my complaints with it. It can be really annoying to use, but it's still the one that we use because it has all the functionality and control that we desire. If, however, you're not so bothered about some of these constant frame rate issues, for example, then you can see MOVIEPRO, great option, $9.99. Beastcam, probably the second best option, or second best alternative, I should say, but a little bit more expensive, $14.99. And I think the other standout on this list as well is ProMovie, $2.99 for entry-level folk just wanting some nice manual control over their video settings. I would love to hear what you have to say on this subject. Different people with different experiences, do share your comments below. You can grab yourself a copy of that comparison chart to help you work your way through this maze of information. And stay tuned as always, we've got lots more content coming soon. Pleasure to have you with us. See you next time.